Hello, my friends. What's happening? Oh, I've just been rearranging my setup here. How you guys doing? We're going to do more terminology today. It was a lot of fun last week. We got through like 5 terms and just kind of talked about mixing and production for an hour, which was great. So we'll get Jon back on here and do it again today. How you guys all doing today? What's happening? Yeah, got a lot of good responses, a lot of cool stuff to chat about. It's weird talking about audio. It's weird talking about things that don't really have universal definitions. So hopefully we'll clarify some stuff today. Getting Jon on here.
All right, that's better.
Okay, everybody's saying it looks good and everything looks good. So
all right.
We'll just go with it and see what the hell happens. So you were at the Conversations guys powwowing in the desert, huh?
Yeah, it was so nice. The desert is really dry, obviously, and I'm not one for dry. So just having a lot of electrolytes, feeling really dehydrated, skin's all fucked up, throat hurts for no reason, like really dry. I'm definitely not made for the desert, even though I live in Los Angeles. It's just a little bit different.
I think nobody's made for the desert. I mean, maybe people adapt to it, but like there's a reason it's the fucking desert.
Also, I guess what's referred to as an HSP, a highly sensitive person.
Oh.
Yeah. Just, well, I mean, it's not only an awe thing. I mean, but yeah. So it was really difficult for me. Like woke up every morning really dry and like just super cotton mouth. I wasn't smoking anything, just like really gross. So got my electrolytes in, feeling all right.
Good, man. You're back to it, huh?
Yeah, back to it. Mixed a couple of songs yesterday and today, feeling good.
Nice, man. Well, you want to do another round of terminology? I think people found it really useful, and it's also just a good vehicle for us to talk about what we talk about.
Yeah.
But it is very strange to see how different people interpret certain things. It's nice to know that there's some universals, but maybe we can just dig right in. You talk about something a lot when you're talking about mixing. You talk about 3D. Somebody asked about 3D, and that's a term that I don't really use. I mean, I've heard people use it. You use it a lot, and I've heard you use it with respect to monitoring. Where when you have good monitoring, you hear a 3-dimensional thing or a 3D thing that's different when you have bad monitoring. Do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah. And by monitoring, let's clarify quickly that it's the marriage of the speakers and the room that would affect the 3D image.
Yeah.
I actually talk more about 4D. I think of mixing in 4
time
dimensions.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, with including time and change across time. And for 2 reasons, the journey of the song and also the way our ears hear and adapt to things across time. That's the only way to understand like if the move was good or bad.
Right.
So when I think about 3D, though, let's just talk about that, which is height, width, and depth. And if you don't have proper monitoring, you can't hear the depth. So the back wall of the room or the space, like the reverb tails. I dialed in a reverb today to 1.6 seconds, this down from 2.2 where it was set because I heard that the tail it needed to be a little bit shorter so it didn't sound too washy. That's the 3rd dimension, the space, the depth, carving out the right amount of low mid for the clarity that we talked about last week and creating that depth and that sense of space between elements, or lack thereof, right? So that affects the density. We also talk about density a lot. So when I think about 3D, I think about the density of everything. They're kind of not interchangeable, but they correspond to each other, and that can come from effects, wet and dry.
It's interesting to talk about, and density is another good one, which we may have talked about a little bit last week. But density and depth, I find that my perception of front to back, the depth of a mix changes based on the volume I'm listening. When I crank stuff up, I'm really listening for sort of overall, like the bass effect in my chest and the feel of it and the bounce and that sort of thing. But when I'm listening for the 3-dimensionality, not the 4-dimensionality, including time, I listen much, much more quietly. Yes. And that's where good monitoring tends to really shine through, as we may have talked about a little last week, that you can get a pretty good sound out of quote unquote cheaper monitors at a good volume, but it's the way that I notice a big difference with like the PMCs is when I'm listening at a low volume, things are very, very even and clear, and the frequency spectrum is really nice at low volumes. And because our ears will naturally compress, we've talked about the Fletcher-Munson curve in the past, the way the relationship of the frequencies changes when you turn up volume. At lower volumes, I get much more clarity of depth.
Yeah, exactly. And you're more. It's more theatrical. It's more cinematic. You're more in the space. So when you think about 3D, I want to be able to touch things, reach into things. It's actually very difficult to do it with two speakers in stereo. Now that I've actually done a full Atmos mix and understood what like all the resistance I get to being able to feel like I'm in a 3-dimensional space with two speakers, I got in seconds in Atmos, and it's like, damn, when the world gets spatial audio on lock all around us, I think I'm gonna thrive. But that when you think about 3D in a stereo field, you're really trying to mimic or kind of force yourself to be in a bigger space. So that's how I think about it. You're in a cube, you're in a room. It's 3D. It's not 2D. It's not a piece of paper. It's not flat. There's that level of depth that it feels tangible. Like you can reach your hand inside and pick out that delay throw, or pick out that the background vocals are behind, in a small room verb or a long washy mega verb or something. Like you can feel those differences. You can hear them too. But we're just faux Atmosing in stereo. It's exact. It's not quite right, but it's the best effort we have.
By the way, shout out Dale Becker, who I chatted with. You linked me with him. We were talking about Atmos as well. What a great dude. He just mastered a James Arthur thing for me, which sounds amazing. So thank you for linking, and shout out Dale Becker, who I think I'm trying to form a long-term relationship with a mastering engineer, and I know you love him, and he was a great dude to chat, and he did chat with, and he did great work. So we talked about the Atmos stuff. I'm really excited to check that out. And for people that don't know, I'll do my shitty version of explaining it, and then you can explain it. It's basically sort of a beyond surround. It's a room modeling concept with a whole bunch of speakers that different setups can have different numbers of speakers, but essentially you have to have a minimum amount to then be able to basically position something in 3-dimensional space rather than pan between speakers, 5.1, 7.1. You actually model enough of a room to where you go, I want something to be right there, and then I want it to slowly move that way. And there's like a computer model that does it. I can't wait to hear it. I've never been in a room. Coming soon to a gift shop near you. Are you gonna set it up there? Okay, well, there you go. You have any idea how soon? I'm going to call Maurice right after I get off the phone. So nice. Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, it sounds like a really interesting concept. It takes a while to get it set up, and the speakers have to be in stock. There's 21 speakers. Like it's a big deal. So I don't know, maybe within a month or two. When you okay, let's do some more vocab. Honky. Not the racial term, but the frequency term. When something that's not a horn sounds like a horn. So 1.2K to 1.8, that nasally sound. Yeah. That's honky. It's brash. It's fast. It's annoying. There's nothing good about honky. I actually used that word today. I'm mixing a song for an artist that actually has dabbled in the retro vibe and is now kind of hopefully crossing over. And this song was super R&B, and they had me mix one of the songs. I think Manny did the rest of the album, but the A&R is a friend and thought I'd be a good fit for this one. And the first thing I was like, are they going to miss the lack of honk in the vocal? That lack of retro spring reverb. That's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say spring reverb. I think that range. It's like an uneq'd spring reverb. I think if it's like AM radio, spring reverb. I mean, I guess honky, of course, horn is the thing, like a trumpet sound. It's actually cool because this song did not have that. They didn't go crazy nostalgic in that, but that's the frequency range that I'm hearing. It was actually like a non-lin verb, really cool effect, really fast, and
Also doubled with a little bit of a long tail, an atmosphere, but it was mostly about the non-lin, which I love, like super 80s Verve style, like the AMS 16 or the RMX. That's what I meant, AMS company, right? But that was cool. But I EQ'd out that frequency honk in the voice and in the reverb, and then I just right before getting on at 11:58, the A&R finally texted back like, "Sounds like you went in on the vocal. It sounds great. Like, haven't heard back from the producer yet, but love what you did on the vocal and the low end." And I made the vocal sound a bit more pop and approachable and less honky. So that's the word I actually used this morning. So.
And I think when I think of honky, I think it's one of those words that is mostly used as a negative. Sometimes it can be good because it's a particular sound, but mostly when people say honky, there's something in the mid range that's poking out too much. That's in that like low end of the trumpet honky. It's what technology stuff is. I don't know if it's quite onomatopoeic, but something like that. You've paused for a second. Can you still hear me? Can you see me?
I can barely ear frozen, but I can hear you.
Okay. You're back a little bit.
There you are.
I think of a lot of these songs as onomatopoeic, where it's like if you say the word honk, that's sort of like it's like that vocal range. Yeah. So that I think is useful for people. We did talk about, is there a difference? We just talked about a little bit with 3D. Do you think of depth as something that is exclusively front to back space, or is there other? I mean, depth can mean a lot of things, but in a mix context, is depth similar to three-dimensionality? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. In that context, if you want to talk about depth in another context, is there depth to the lyric? Is there meaning?
Of course.
Hidden meaning, is there depth to a sound? Is there something about the sound that, hits your gut, hits your belly and makes you feel something? Or is it kind of more linear and flat? It doesn't only have to be in a mixed context, but in a mixed context, the front to back, for the depth. So the whole 3D image is side to side with top to bottom height, and front to back is depth, right? That's what the dimensions would be like when you have a cube, when you buy a piece of furniture. So it's the same exact analog to a piece of furniture building,
Okay, what about, there's a couple of good ones. Hollow. When you think of hollow, is like a mid-range scoop, or
like a yes, that's one way to create it. But like a resonant drum that clearly has nothing inside of it and has a long sustain with a quick attack. Sounds hollow, like a tube, something that sounds like a tube being hit.
I think of hollow and thin having a relationship where thin is almost like a lack of low end, and hollow is just with just low end and no mid range.
Yeah.
So like a thin sound is high frequencies and no mids, no lows, or not enough mids or lows. And hollow is like just nothing in the middle.
Yeah.
Makes sense. It's a nice word for it.
It does. I think that's exactly right. Because when I think about hollowing out a reverb, it's when it's too dense, and it's occupying the same space as the dry vocal. So I guess that's how I would hollow it out.
Yeah.
I don't really, actually, that's funny because that's not a word I tend to use or get asked about. Granted, I don't mix hollow.
Yeah.
I mix very full spectrum. It's kind of my style. So that's not a word that I get very often. Every once in a while, I'll get like the vocal feels a little thin and maybe I have the filter too high. That's really rare. I usually don't filter anything. Like I'm pretty low filter at 190. I try to let every bit of every sound through as much as possible on first attempts. Like I try to keep everything as full and realistic and full spectrum as possible. So I actually don't usually use the word hollow. I don't think I've ever seen that in an email to me.
Hex has an interesting point in there about, he says he often feels that way or maybe gets that note when he over EQs a vocal. And I think part of that might be just the phase relationship that happens when you start putting a lot of EQ on something. You're just going to get things to kind of feel further back, and you try to I've definitely tried to compensate by turning up high end EQ, but at a certain point, you're not going to get something to feel present and forward if it's a whole lot of EQ, because there's enough phasing stuff going on that it's going to hollow phasey. That I think
could
that's
be.
something.
I don't know. I don't agree with that. I don't think that hollow means phasey. I think a tree trunk can be hollowed out. It doesn't sound phasey. It just sounds like there's a resonant tone inside of it. Like when you wine bottle is hollow, tone to it. If you blow over the top of it, I don't know. I don't see it as phasey. Yeah. Phasiness can cause hollowness, but I don't think hollow and phasey are so aligned.
A couple people asked about tall.
I don't know.
Tall and short.
Hollow is a weird one. Let's move on.
Tall is a word. Yeah, let's move on. A couple people asked about tall and short. Like 3 people asked about it, and I don't ever hear that note. Is that a note, or is people describe records as tall?
No, but people have described my mixes as tall, as I think about height in it. I've never gotten a note that says, "Can you make the mix taller?" or "Can you make that sound taller?" No, I've never gotten that before.
What do people mean when they say something is tall? Just like a full frequency spectrum?
Yeah, more height, more high end, more low end, a bigger space. I mean, I love making things sound tall. I think about making things sound tall. Maybe that's why I don't need someone to give me that note, because I mix tall. I think PMCs help you mix tall. I think proper monitoring in a proper room helps you mix tall, because you're mixing full spectrum. Even today, I was filtering a lot of sounds down to 15K, making space for the things that are going to sit above it. That helps you mix tall, because you can actually place things in a certain space. Like the guitars on this mix that I was just talking about are filtered down to 6 or 7K. Well, we don't need that space in the guitar, so it makes other things sound taller.
So oftentimes the perception of a wide mix or a tall mix, where the frequency spectrum is long, comes from actual clarity in the highest and lowest frequencies,
exactly,
rather than amount of it. I mean, we talk about that a lot. That the way you talk about filtering has definitely changed the way I think about mixes, where it's like something can sit at 10K and then something can sit at 13K. Or 8K and 12K, and those things being separate in vocals or cymbals or whatever makes things feel taller. I suppose that's where that word comes from.
Yeah, this question, John, why would you let anything above 10K come through in the guitar? I think you mean why wouldn't I? I just said that I filter off all of it.
I think he was quoting you.
Oh, is that a quote? Oh,
looks like a quote.
The chat is still being a little weird for me. There's nothing above there that's good. Maybe in the reverb of some jangly Brian Eno sounding guitar, but it's just not cool, like, to have guitars up that high. Like, cool, at least right now and for the past few years, is darker records, like darker everything except for the vocal. I mean, getting something tall, when I think about tall, I think about filtering. I think about where you filter. I think about leaving your sub down to 12 hertz. I think about not filtering up to 30 and mix for the radio. It just doesn't make any sense. Get your balances right, and that won't distort the radio any more than it's already distorted. I don't think we're supposed to be It's so weird when I see that on a mix with the masters and the engineers, like filtering up to 30 for radio. It's like, we're not going to hear that on a small device. Well, you're going to feel it in other places. And someone just wrote, in the car, your mixes feel like I can hear the bass in my toes, and the vocal, I can't see the chat anymore, but up in my ears in the car. And like, that's what it translates. If you filter up that high in the car, it's not going to tickle your toes. Like, I don't know. I think about tall and I don't think about short. I've never said the word short about a mix ever, but I think tall because I want to mix tall. I think it's larger than life. I think that's what we're getting at in mixes these days, that we missed in kind of the EDM over compressed era. I think that besides a couple, obviously, besides like Skrillex and Deadmau5, their stuff sounds larger than life. I think we're trying to get into hyper realism. And that's what Atmos is going to help us do. It's and I think I've been trying to do that in stereo mixing since I started, but specifically in the last 5 to 10 years being in Los Angeles, is how do you make acoustic and organic sound larger than that? Like, let's get them to be the biggest version. And that's EQ. That's sound design. That's shaping, and that's filtering. And it's the relationship.
I would say without necessarily trying to make it sound artificial or different, making it still sound like the instrument, but making it larger than life, a hyper real version of it.
Hyper real, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to point out. Whenever we talk about clarity and high end, it's a bit counterintuitive, but a lot of it is taking out high end from most things, making one thing. You know, as we've talked about a lot, if you want something to be loud, other things have to be soft. Kian said it on the Discord, and he said it in other times. Like when somebody says, "I want this to be loud," the first thing is, okay, what do I make not loud? What do I turn down? You want to feature something? What do I turn down? So the way to make a Jon Castelli style mix with the high end being super clear is actually to filter a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, I don't boost high end really.
Really?
Just on my master bus.
Yeah, and you probably get some good saturation from
I very rarely an additive in high end, like air that we went into that last week.
Yeah.
Air. I don't really boost quote unquote air. I have an overall high end shelf on my Fern BT5 mastering EQ. That does the heavy lifting for me because it's the most musical EQ I've ever heard in my life. So why not let that do the trick? Even today, I was just messing around and I turned it all the way up, like plus 14. So that could be the mix. It was too bright for my taste, but it was musical and gorgeous. And I actually thought about leaving it on this, but apparently the A&R likes it, so I'm going to keep it for now. Speaking of phasey, my AirPods are doing a phasey thing right now. Thanks, Apple.
Having all kinds of technical difficulties.
I know.
Figure a couple engineers
I like
this shit out.
tall. I like tall. I think tall is modern. I think tall is what everyone's striving to get, and I think compressors get rid of height. And so when things are too compressed, that's why I don't like compressors. It folds it in, and it makes it like here instead of like I want to mix. Sorry, the camera's not big enough. I want to mix bigger and taller. And compression can bring things into focus, but it also lowers the ceiling. I think limiters don't as much, and I'm not even doing much of that either. But I think leaving things be allows for the height to be what it's supposed to be.
I want to go back to one thing you said before about subs and filtering. There's Daft Punk supposedly broke up, but since they never do anything, I don't really know what that means. But apparently Daft Punk broke up, and I fucking love Daft Punk, so I've been listening to a bunch of it.
It's so weird. Can we talk about that for just 3 seconds?
Let's do it.
Or a minute. Broke up? It's been 3 decades.
Yeah,
they broke up. Like they don't like each other anymore. It's just the media response to this and like the terminology used. They're just deciding not to work together anymore. They've made an epic run for it and made amazing music. Why does that have to be broke up?
I don't know, but I love
just such a ridiculous use of language to get clicks or something. It's too heavy-handed. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I don't know. It's sort of weird. I saw a great tweet. I don't know if I shared it or just sent it to a couple of people. Or somebody said Daft Punk not working for the last 7 years and then quitting is aspirational.
Yeah, exactly. Like they've always done it on their own terms, and now they're just done doing it. It's just too. It's too clickbaity. Like it's just not. Read between the lines. Like let's get some context. It's what's wrong with all communication these days publicly, and it's just. Or most, sorry, obviously we not all, but it's just
we're trying.
Let's work it out. Let's just not put such a hard line on things. Broke up just sounds like really aggressive. Anyway, I wanted to vent about that because I've been thinking about it all weekend. Like, what?
Well, I love those records, and I've gone back and listened to them, and it made me think of your filtering stuff. I was listening. I don't know if it was One More Time or one of those records. It has some like 20 or like 15 cycles thing in the kick drum because I was listening to it on the Spectrum Analyzer, and it's like it's got some below sub bass, like like earth core low frequency, almost like single digit shit, and just randomly because they pitched some kick drum sample in and they weren't filtering shit up, and those are some of the hardest sounding dance records ever. Yes, it's there because there's headroom. It's not overly loud, so there's room for that tone, that cycle, that wave to develop in a room, in a club. It's the best shit. It's the best shit. I mean, I don't know. I don't really filter higher than 12 hertz, 10. Really?
on records. I just lower the volume and then remake any punch or mid range that I need in the drum sound or the bass. It's like, if you get your balances right, you're not over limiting. That's money for that.
Yeah,
Anyway.
absolutely. Let's see if we can grab a couple other ones. Oh man, this is one I don't know if we've talked about this a couple times before, and this is a topic that I feel like you could there are probably master classes on. It'd be a great question for my buddy Dave Elish, other people. People are asking about pocket. What does it mean?
Yeah.
What does pocket mean? What does it mean? What does that mean to you?
It's mysterious.
We talked about bounce last week a little bit, but pocket, and it's a term for
It's
rhythm.
similar.
You know, there's something. Go ahead. What do you think?
It's similar. I mean, they're interchangeable to some degree and not to some degree. Like the pocket doesn't have to bounce, but the bounce is a pocket, right? Like this is tough. This is good. The pocket is the groove. It's where
the groove exists.
Yeah, exactly. So where the drum and bass, exactly what Jared just said, like where the drum and bass sits, like where the rhythm section sits and feels, like whether the guitar is just ahead and the drums and the bass are behind, or vice versa, or the way that the bass hits just behind the kick, right? That's my favorite, when like you're doing a live bass and the bass player is just right behind the kick. And just behind it. It's not on it, it's right after it. That's the pocket. You're looking for the pocket. Like when you're jamming, you're waiting for the pocket to fit. Like the best thing that I can imagine doing is you roll tape on a record. Everybody's live in the room. It's like when you start with the chorus before you drop into the beginning of the record, that's to find the pocket. So that intro or that first verse is already lined up, is already felt, already in tempo, already locked in. That's the pocket. So locked in is pocket, yeah.
The pocket is the essential rhythmic core of the song, and things in the when something is in the pocket it is performed or nudged or quantized or whatever in such a way that it locks in nicely and feels correct. The pocket is the correct essential rhythm of the song. So when something is in the pocket, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's on a grid or hitting together. Sometimes it's explicitly not.
It
Sometimes
is the grid. The pocket is the grid. It's
the grid for
grid.
that song, yeah.
Yeah, it's a flexible grid.
You know, it's something that I haven't messed with a lot. We've been talking about it a bit on the Discord. Bradley was talking about it. A feature that Ableton has that's so great. That Ableton has the ability to basically make a groove template out of any.
Doesn't do a great job.
Yeah, certainly you'd have to edit it and do it, but you can basically create groove templates.
Extract. Yeah.
You can extract, and then like I remember using Beat Detective on Pro Tools.
Yeah, extract grooves. Yeah,
where you can extract grooves, and then but it always does an incomplete job, and then you have to do it. One of my friends, my buddy Lovi, who's a producer, mastering engineer, and we've talked about this before. He's African, and his ability to find pocket and rhythmic stuff is better than anybody I've ever worked with, and it's all about nudging for him. It's all about taking things off the grid and finding the pocket via this feels a little more behind, and it's a little swung, but not too much. But then this thing hits after it. A lot of that Afrobeat music is magical with that sort of stuff. I mean, he makes all kinds of records, but there's an essential pocket that is the summation of the elements. Yeah. It's not one thing leading it. It's the relationship between the rhythmic instruments.
Yeah.
Damn, I love punk. I want to go make crazy grooves. I've been listening to so much Daft Punk. Because the one of the dope things about Daft Punk, one of the many dope things, is the way, having not really dug into their records in a few years and having this new setup, and anytime you revisit the greats every few years, you sort of notice new things about it. And I was noticing how much the musical samples that they're using in some of the songs affect the groove of the songs. I mean, that's sort of the
pulse of their records. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, there's so much on the grid, dance stuff, but like when you take some of those weird instrumental samples that lean in funny ways and are, performed by a human and then chopped up, they do weird things to the groove, to the pocket, that are really, really magical.
Yeah, I used to take famous records. Instead of sampling them, I would put them through a sidechain output, and I would sidechain other like stagnant synth sounds to those grooves. So the synth would pulse to like a James Brown record or something like that.
Interesting.
That was always cool because it would get unpredictable. Like you would never perform it like that, but you're sidechaining like a pad synth, for example, and you would duck it to that groove thing. It's all about finding unique pockets.
Man, James Brown records are maybe the ultimate example of pocket. And I didn't understand that until I went on one of my guitar binges, and I was like, I want to learn some of these old funk records. Because I think of funk and I think of like Chic and Nile Rodgers and some of those things. But if you go back to the Godfather of Soul, or really the originator of funk, those James Brown records where a guitar player will play one part that's 3 notes for 6 minutes, and it's magical the entire time. And apparently he was just ruthless with his band, and just like, that band was the tightest, most intense, and he would literally do things like, all the like 1 time, 2 time, all that kind of stuff. But they were there to basically service his stage persona and his lead singer and his preacher type greatness on stage. And they were just perfect. They would play these long grooves and let him do his thing. And then they would make adjustments when he called him out. But each of those guitar riffs, and I'm sure the bass and the horns and all that kind of stuff too, I sat and tried to play one of those guitar riffs for like 6 minutes, and I was like, this is impossibly good, and it's 3 notes. Just perfect in the pocket. It's a perfect example of the pocket.
Pocket.
Yeah.
It's a fun word to say also. Let's move off pocket. What else we got?
Let's see. This is kind of an easy one. Color. People talk about color on records.
I don't think it's easy.
Okay, go.
I love those notes. I love those notes. I love when someone asks if I can make the bridge more orange or something, or just something more visual. That goes back to the 3D. The 3D tends to be more visual. Like, people talk about auras. Like, I'm not really into that shit, but I can. But I think colors have sound.
Well, I think we can talk about a few different things. I think this is the word color, not specific colors.
Yeah, it's the word color.
So somebody wants coloration on a sound. I assume.
Man, I'm taking it in another direction. That's another direction to go too.
Yeah,
I think that there's many directions to think about color.
This is why we talk about this, because it means different things.
Yeah, do you want to color a sound? Sure. Harmonic, saturation. We talk about that every fucking week. But when I think about color, I think about an overall color of a section. Like, what is it looking for? Is there mystery to it? Is it purple? Is it bright? Is it dark? That's when I think about color. Yeah, does a specific sound want color? Sure. How do we get color? All types of gear have color. All types of instruments have different color. But sections of songs and lyrics and emotional content is colorful. So I think about color that way. That's how I like to communicate about it. I think I want notes that are more colorful in description than more technical in description. That gets me going. Like today, just got a note from someone. I was like, love what you did. Something about it feels a little less human. Like maybe, I don't know, I was told I made it sound too good. We need to go back a little bit, and it lost some of the human quality. And I'm like, I actually don't fully agree. I think it sounds more human because of how I have it, but I understand the note. But that's a color to me. That's like that's in the same vein, comment wise, than saying like, hey, the guitar is too quiet now. It's like, well, maybe it'll feel more human if the guitar is louder, but I'm left to interpret that. And I think about those notes interchangeably when I think about language like that, and color is one of them.
Let's jump into that, because that was the other one I want to get into. Human, organic, natural.
Yeah, they're all in the same.
I get those notes all the time. I use those words all the time. They're in the same zone. Talk about some of those. So you got a note that said, I want it to be more human. What do you hear from them when you get a note from an A&R that says, I need it to be a little more human. I need it to be a little more natural.
I might have tightened it up too much, put everything in its place a little too much. Maybe that there needs to be some more angular nature to things, something jumping out a bit more let it be kind of mentality.
Like it's too clean, it's too refined, it's too processed.
That's not normally something that I think, because I don't over process in general.
Yeah.
So to me, actually, over processed would mean that it's too, that could be. Sorry, I'm relating it too much to myself on this. No, yes,
that's okay.
Over processed would be less human. Yes, fundamentally, sure. But someone said tuning. Yeah, tuning occasionally, definitely. I mean, without a doubt, that's less human if you're tuning
is
too much.
Tuning is a big one. I think almost everybody overtunes things.
I'm thinking transients. I'm thinking things are too controlled and too in place on this project specifically, that like maybe they want things to be a little bit less controlled, because I don't perfect things. So I'm not really moving. So when I think about, over processed would be a word, a little too much. Maybe I turn things that are more erratic in performance down, and brought up some more consistent sounding things that I thought helped the groove move along. Like I probably did it for a reason. Maybe I wanted things to feel a little more stabilized. But maybe the erraticism is what they're missing. Like thinking about acoustic guitars, and like maybe they need to be a little bit more rattly and janky and louder, and I maybe turn them down and smooth them out a little bit with a limiter or something, or saturator. So it could mean so many things, but organic is just more acoustic, more realistic, more texture and less linear, less synthetic. It's like
in the mixing process, I think of all of these things as how much processing you're putting on something. And processing can mean adding brightness in the EQ, can be adding compression, can be auto-tune, can be cleaning up silences, taking out breaths or automating down breaths in vocals. I think it's so hard to talk about this stuff, but there's something about, I guess it's processed and unprocessed, but you said something a minute ago, and now I can't remember exactly what it is that you said, but something about like the erratic spikes of things, uncontrolled. Like there's so many tools we use in mixing to control the sound of something, to keep something tethered to if there's a honky frequency that comes out at a certain point, you're not reducing that as much with dynamic EQ, or those are the things that make things sound more or less processed, and less processing will make things sound more natural, more organic, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, let's see if there's a couple more in here that I thought were kind of cool. I like thickness. Somebody asked about thickness. I mean, that's very much like density. It's I would say the amount of harmonic information that's in there. And we talk about density and thickness. You can't really EQ in thickness. Right? Like, would you say that? Like, you can't EQ something to make it thicker, really.
Yes, you can. Without a doubt.
Okay.
So I have 12 hardware tube EQs.
Well,
I'm making things sound thicker intentionally.
Would you be able to do that with
the length of it gets expanded?
Without
length,
but without the harmonic saturation that goes along with those EQs, would you be able to get it out of just EQ?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. Because I think
absolutely. I did it to like a. I always call them rim shots, but that's when the snare hits the rim. The side stick.
Rim clicks.
A side stick.
Side stick.
So there was a side stick on this record, and I boosted like 10 dB of 800 hertz, and that's woodiness, that's organicness, that's a natural sounding region. And that made it thicker and longer. That made the sound itself, like if you committed that sound, the transient, like the wave of it, would go from here to here for sure, from EQ with no harmonic saturation on it. That's thickness.
That's a good point.
Because
the tail is where a lot of that frequency range was, and by boosting that frequency range, you're making the actual sound feel longer. Or it's stronger for longer.
That's sound design. If you wanted a thicker sound, you would be additive. So that's the simple answer is you have to be additive to thicken it up. Yeah. And you could do that with all different tools. Yes, I think saturation tubes, for example, do it easier without having to EQ. But I think it's a lot of, for me, it's mostly EQ. It's dramatic EQ. It's not subtle. Big EQ moves.
And I'm sure the tubes help all of that.
Yeah, definitely. Good converters help all of that. We talk about that, right? Like, that's good. I like that. The side stick on the Zayn single is great. Yeah, that's exactly that. That's like a lot of 200 and 800 and like big boosts on that side stick. That was a great example. That's exactly what it was. Like a lot of low mid boosts, a lot of mid range, and it makes it thicker. It was too toy like before. It was too fickle.
Thin, perhaps.
Yeah. Damn. Makes the song. What about that vocal? What about the lyric?
It's good to take the compliment, but to say the side stick being a little bit thicker makes a song,
the song.
is a little bit much.
Yeah.
but
yeah, clearly a producer in the on the chat.
Yeah, definitely producers watching. Man, that side stick was so thick it makes the song. Like, all right. I'm with you though. I mean, I like that shit.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Thickness is the game, man. Thickness is the sauce.
Yeah.
Thickness is the fullest realization of what a sound could be. Like the full intention of why did you choose that sound? That's what I'm always trying. That's my move. If I had a move, I'm going to say to bring thickness to everything. I don't think thickness is only low end. And then you can say that bass is thick, and that's a whole thing too. But every sound being fully realized to what was dropped in, that's thickness. And that's the game. That's my sauce. I don't know who else's sauce that is, but I'll fully admit the secret sauce for my mixing is thickness of every sound. Like I'll take the hi-hat and I'll boost low end or let's say mid-range in the hi-hat, but lower than you'd expect, and it gives thickness. It makes it sound like a 14-inch hi-hat goes to a 16 to a 17-inch hi-hat. And when you think about a hi-hat, think about the size of it on the like. Think about a Dave Grohl hi-hat versus like a Steve Gadd hi-hat or something like that, like fucking thick. And when that sound is there, and I think about the thickness, that's what I'm. So actually, thickness is a really important one. I don't want to overlook the importance of what that means for groove, for pocket, all the things we've been talking about today. 3-dimension, all of the things that we've actually talked about. This is kind of the overarching word for it is thickness. I think it's if thickness fills space, thickness makes you hear the end of it, and the thickness makes you feel and hear the intention. I think.
When you are, this is a great topic, and let's go on this for a minute. When you're bringing up a mix, because this is one of the places that the psychology of producing is can be fairly different than mixing, and I'm sure you will give examples or give a good argument for how it's the same at times as well. But your understanding as a mixer, when you're receiving a finished production, do you listen to you listen to the whole mix? We've talked about how you set up a mix before. You listen to the mix, you listen to the rough. Sometimes you'll pull everything down, bring up kick drum. There's various ways you do it. But when you're listening to a sound in isolation, are you thinking about what is the whole frequency range of this sound? What is the intention of it? Are you trying to make the sounds themselves complete in addition to how they add up? Because it's an interesting topic. We talk a lot about making EQ moves while listening to the whole mix, trying to like make a whole sound, like trying to refine a sound of a specific instrument without the context of the whole song is often a waste of time.
Never do it.
But so when you're talking about thickening up the rim, I assume you solo it for a second to go like, what's in this? But then
Nope.
Not at all, huh?
Never.
So when you
not even once.
So let's talk about that Zayn mix that someone brought up in the chat. You're listening to the rough mix and you immediately go, there's more frequencies to be had in this rim, or you're reacting to it and saying the groove doesn't feel right, or I need the backbeat to be harder. What goes through your head?
I need a more emphasized backbeat. I don't like things sounding cartoony and toyish, like Spider said in there. I want that's an R&B record. It's like it needs to feel like that, right? Like aren't the best R&B records, like that backbeat is emphasized and there's length. Yes, thanks, Spider. Never, not even once. Like, I don't solo. I did mix this entire song yesterday that I keep referencing back to with the honkiness and the vocal that I took out with no drums for the first 3 hours. And I only put the drums in for the last hour.
Wow.
I really wanted the vocal to be the star of the show. And I'm not surprised that was the A&R's comment. Like, sounds like you went in on the vocal. I went in on every syllable of that vocal. Even had my assistant Josh do a second round of clip gain while I was still mixing it sonically and then adjusting words so I didn't have to compress it. I sent it through my Fern VT7, which gave some juice, but not really compression, more just tone. And I wanted to mix the guitar, the Rhodes, and the vocal and background vocals by themselves. And then any candy synth element that came in, there was like a bell thing in the last chorus, like that had more love and attention to it than the drums for the first 3 hours. And that vocal is nothing can impede on that vocal. So then I can think about the side stick, which is in this record, like the Zayn record, and I can fit the side stick behind the vocal or under the vocal, right? So when the side stick in this record is like clicky, I want it to be like, I can pitch it down underneath the vocal. I can EQ it so the high mids are not cracking up there and it's cracking lower. I want nothing in the way of the vocal on a really emotional, vulnerable R&B record like I just am talking about that I wish I can tell, but when it comes out, we can talk about it.
Great.
Because it's really fucking good. And the songwriter that wrote it is incredible, and she deserves mad credit for this record. And I'm just so into the lyric. It's like hearing a man sing these words. Like I can't wait to talk about it when it comes out. But hearing a man sing these words is the direction of the mix. Like, I've never heard a man say this before, so I'm going to make sure everybody hears a man saying these words.
Right.
So nothing else matters but that, and then everything else is to now slot in to that being the focus. So the side stick can't be thin and in the vocal range. It has to be thick, lower, juicier. Same thing with the Zayn record.
Do you, and this we talk about this a lot, you're not soloing in isolation, but you will solo in groups in order to hear the relationship between... Very
different. We've talked about that in earlier, like one of the first couple episodes. I call it solo mode. I solo a bunch of things at once. Now I'm more in mute mode because there's no automation, because I don't like to make some other people's sessions. I started what I call solo mode because other people would have like nonsensical mute automation. Just like cut the clip and fucking mute it. Like, why are you muting faders?
I haven't done mute automation in forever.
No, it's ridiculous. It's so annoying. So I started solo mode. Now I just mute because I'm mixing mostly from stems. And so I'll solo groups. I'll solo the relation. Like let's talk about this. Once I had the drums in, then I went to drums, bass, and vocal, and I only mixed the drums, bass, and vocal, just again to make sure that none of the transients were getting in the way of the vocal. So I always had the vocal in on a mix like this. I've never mixed any part of it without the vocal in.
Interesting. So you for this particular mix, it'd be great to come back to it. That's one of the things that people ask about a lot. We got. I'll
remember it. This is a big one for me. So
yeah, people talk about asking about specific songs a lot. So maybe we can do an episode where we do talk about that.
Yeah, it'll probably be out in a couple of months, but
even like people asking about Kid Laroi stuff, people asking about Khalid stuff. So I'm going to do some specific episodes on that. But in this particular song, you basically mixed it without drums and bass. So it was like what,
3 hours?
Guitars, keys, vocals.
No, bass was in. Bass is gorgeous live bass. Like the record is more about the bass than the kick.
So it was basically everything but drums for a while to make sure the vocal is featured in the way you want the entire time. Then you bring in the drums, but take off all the tonal instruments other than the bass and go bass, drums, vocals to make sure rhythmically. So it's like for this particular mix, you start out doing things not transient based as much. You're making sure that the frequency ranges and the tonality and the richness and the thickness and the density is balanced between elements, and then you go and do the transients, and then
that's interesting because I'm actually considering transients during this whole time, right? Like the guitar is kind of like a Jamie XX guitar sound, like a little bit verby and mysterious, and just think the XX, and that's the guitar sound. It's exactly that. And I want that to be punchy. Like that's driving the record. Like the song starts with that, not with the drums, like that by itself. So that's driving the record. So the transient of the guitar and the vocal are the transients of the record. And then the bass comes in complementing the guitar line, but obviously lower and sub in the toes. And the bass comes in the chorus. So there's an emotional moment. That's when it enters. It's like a pickup, a walk down pickup into the chorus. And like, I want to have that satisfying moment of low end coming from the bass, coming from the harmonics, not from the kick drum. So when the kick drum comes in, it emphasizes that harmonic moment. So the drums in this record are used to emphasize emotional moments. They're not driving the record, in my opinion. Though they still hit, and I'm still doing some clipping and trying to make it sound modern and thick. The drums are thick. They, to me, are the least important part of the record. The payoff. Yeah, Mike just chimed in. He came over this morning, and I showed him this, and that was his word. Like when the chorus dropped, there was a big payoff, and that came harmonically. That didn't come from the drums.
Very interesting.
It's just another approach. You know what I mean? Like you can't come at every record the same way. That's what's to be learned by this conversation, right? Like there's no one way into a record. And this record was the vocal. The vocal told the story. Again, it's very much about the lyric. And for mixers that say they don't listen to lyrics, like you gotta listen, you gotta hear the lyric. At least understand the concept of the record. This is one of those that if I was not an emotional, attached lyric lover, I wouldn't do the song justice. Yeah, exactly. At what point in the mixing do you start panning mid-range stuff? I don't pan mid-range stuff. I pan full spectrum elements. Yeah.
This is a great, we talk about this a lot, but it's the reason I think everybody should do a little bit of everything. Because even if you are going to be the next Jon Castelli and being just a total mixer, the idea that you're thinking about the production and thinking about the lyric and thinking about who wrote the song and how the lyric is coming out is a huge part of what makes you good at what you're doing. Yeah. And being able to dig into all the aspects of it, I think, is a really important thing that I think a lot of people overlook.
No, that's something that's, I'm glad you just said that. It's really like, when I got sent the demo to ask if I want to mix the song, my first comment back to the A&R was, damn, this lyric is crazy. Like a man singing this? He's like, yeah, exactly. Thank you, Spider. Without the lyric, how can you know the meaning of the arrangement and what the section is supposed to do? Exactly.
Well, so, it gets into another thing of you mixing things in other languages, though, that you may not literally
it's tough.
know.
It's hard. I just did some Portuguese recently, and it was tough for me. But I asked the artist. I was like, what are you saying here?
Yeah.
What does the chorus mean? At least give me what the chorus is saying. I don't necessarily need to know everything about it, but I had to ask. But it helped. I knew exactly what he was going for. So, yeah, I think, just consider a new way into a mix. I ask myself that about conversations. Like, as we're doing podcasts, how do I find a way into this conversation without shifting it too far? Or if I shift it far away, is it for the better? What's your way into the mix? What's your way into the song? What's the audience's way into the song? Audience's way into the song most of the time is the lyric. Yeah. So let's emphasize that. I just love that was the note I just got back on a text right before we jumped on. Was like, damn, you went in on the vocal. It's like, the dude can sing. A lot of the times I'm getting things that are pretty good vocalist. This happens to be a great vocalist. Yeah. Potentially one of the better of our time. And I want to make sure that's the highlight. So why would I mute it?
After we get off here, text me who the artist is, because I'm so curious.
You can just call me.
Okay, well, I'll call you right after this.
Yeah, I got to call the A&R, but I'll just call me.
Well, we're at about an hour. I think we did good today. Hopefully it was useful to you guys. John, always great to see you. I'll be on the Discord. Oh, the other thing, I want to do a Clubhouse thing this week. So maybe we could jump on there, get Kian on there, just nerd out about some shit and just see what that feels like. I got a few extra invites, which I'll give out to people for those that don't have Clubhouse.
I'm good Thursday or Friday afternoon, maybe Friday afternoon.
Okay. Yeah, let's try that out.
End a week hang. Just do a quick hour midweek randomly.
Yeah, just say what's up, bring some people on. But yeah, it's people are on there. It's an interesting new. I've been lurking and checking out a little bit. There's some obviously ridiculous things happening there, but some very interesting things happening there as well. So
Mop the Kid. What converter did you buy?
Lynx Aurora.
Was it?
I think so. I think we talked about it in DMs. There's a lot of this discussion on the Discord. I got to get you on Discord too. There's really, really interesting conversations happening there, which I'll be on right after this. On their chat.
Mike Miller was just telling me people getting Auroras and Helos. Like that's. I'm glad it's hitting people. I'm glad people are hearing the difference.
You linked me with the Lynx guy, and I think he's going to send me one. And I'm going to do a bunch of A/B and with the Apollo and do some tests.
Let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys. Love you, John.
Love you. Bye.
Bye, guys.